Welcome to the Global Chamber. We're now officially starting and being recorded. And as we have members from around the world, I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. I'm Susan Asadi. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City chapter of the Global Chamber. And just briefly, the Global Chamber is a growing global community of CEOs, executives, and leaders, and we're in over 500 metro regions around the world. And we're focused on helping companies grow within and across metropolitan areas around the world. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining us today here at Bank of America, New York City headquarters. And we're going to have a conversation about ESG and how it impacts banking, mining, and compliance. And I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers. First of all, Irina Sirota, Senior VP and Market Executive of Bank of America. And thank you for hosting us here today for the in-person cohort of this ESG meeting. Irina manages a team that is responsible for acquiring, expanding, and retaining a commercial banking portfolio, generating revenue from new and existing clients. She leads a group of experienced professionals delivering world-class solutions to commercial clients in the lower middle market segment. Her mission is to support local businesses by providing holistic banking solutions and afford them the power to fuel continued growth. And joining us today remotely is Melissa Sanderson. She just recently was appointed President, North America of American Rare Earths. And she's a very active member of the Global Chamber, having served on advisory boards for the company. She's an accomplished leader in mining and diplomacy with a global career that has spanned 30 plus years. She has a wealth of industry experience based on her time at global mining leader Freeport-McMoRan, and in a corporate ESG role, and as a VP for Africa. She's a recipient of numerous awards, including the U.S. State Department Superior Honor Award and the Women in Mining UK 2022 Top 100 Global Inspirational Women in Mining. Thank you, Mel. Our third speaker is Albert Tan, manager of PricewaterhouseCoopers Sustainability and ESG reporting team, and specializes in GHG accounting, sustainability data, and reporting. He works with clients to build GHG inventories, assure GHG data, and develop process and controls for future regulatory reporting. Additionally, he helps clients access their business and processes against the SEC climate proposal. Previously, he worked at ISS, engaging with asset managers. So thank you three very much. And for everyone who's joined us today, including John and Charles, thank you for coming, and we'll have a chance to hear your introductions later. I will have some questions for the panelists, and at the end, we're going to open it up to your questions. Now, different from normally the way we do it with Global Chamber, there's not a chat in the Bank of America Zoom. So what you'll do is you'll raise your hand, similar to Clubhouse and other platforms. So if you have a question at the end, you can raise your hand, and hopefully we'll get to it. And if not, we'll send the questions out to the panelists, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So starting with Irina, I wanted to ask you, what does ESG mean for Bank of America customers, and what are you doing about it?
Well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you all for coming here today and joining us virtually. So we all know the world is rapidly taking action to lower house gas emissions. All businesses should consider having a plan how to navigate the transition to a low carbon economy. We've heard the term net zero being thrown around, but here at business banking, specifically at Bank of America, where our clients are smaller in size, they generate anywhere from 5 to 50 million in revenue. They think the Paris Agreement and the commitment for net zero has nothing to do with them really. So at Bank of America, we're beginning to talk to our clients, and we're very early in the journey about educating our clients what net zero is. And our aim is really to have an advisory conversation and make sure our clients understand their goals and we understand their goals and what their aspirations are, and how we can help our clients achieve their net zero targets.
Okay, we're going to be coming back to more what you're doing with your customers. So Mel, wanted to ask you a question about, is ESG necessary and doable, and how do you think it's different than what was referred to in the past, corporate responsibility?
Yeah, there's a good bundle of questions to start a provocative, long conversation with, but I'll keep the answer brief. ESG is not just necessary, it's fundamental to business success in the mining industry. It differs from CSR in the sense that the scope and the urgency are broader and more intense, respectively. So by broader, I mean that particularly the S in ESG, which, by the way, ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspects of doing business. The S in that ESG has become particularly important in a much better informed world. Citizens are a lot more active and a lot more engaged, and they're a lot better informed, and they're a lot more quickly informed. So even though most mines are located in rural settings around the world, nowadays, thanks to the internet, the entire world can be aware within hours of any kind of significant incidents at a mine site. And obviously your local communities react even more quickly. And mines increasingly around the world are finding that when their local neighbors are unhappy, there's immediate and profound consequences for the company. Think, for instance, about indigenous demonstrations in Peru that are cutting off major highways, forcing mines to essentially stockpile product because they can't reach the port to export. That is money that mounts up very, very quickly. And nothing gets the attention of any company in the world, mining or otherwise, than losing money. So I give you that as one fundamental ground truth to demonstrate the importance and the urgency of ESG, and we can come back to it.
Okay, good, and we will. Okay, so Albert, since you're on the data side, wanted to see if you could share with us, what are the reporting regulations that companies need to adhere to today?
Nothing. Honestly, that's the big thing. If you don't really know right now, there's a big difference between mandatory and voluntary reporting. Everyone here at Bank of America understands what a 10K is. That is regulated reporting. That has been done for 100 years. SEC, it's auditable. So when you go to a 10K, you know exactly that number, to a fair degree, is good. If I go to the CDP, Climate Disclosure Project, I don't know what that number means. Where's that data coming from? Essentially, like to CSR reports, a lot in the past, it has been basically, I've planted a tree, good job, where's my money? Which is good, it comes from a good place, but we're at a point now that we need to start to measure it. And that's what the SEC climate proposal has done. That was started last year. It's in the climate registry now. It should be sorry, let me backtrack that. This is my view only, we'll say, that it'll probably be we've been anticipating it to be finalized for the past year. We can talk more about the proposal, but that will be a game changer, and that is going to be a considerable burden on a lot of companies. Burden is in a good way, because we're going to get better data, better quality, so I can trust what that metric means. We talk about things like net zero, plan to do that, but my big thing is, how do you know what to get to net zero if you don't know what you emit? You emit 1, you emit 7 billion, right? Furthermore, what is it that we're actually talking about? Is it a unit of length, time, volume? What is it? I know, right? I'm not trying to be like whatever, but I think that's just where we are in the business cycle where we need to do it. You cannot manage what you don't measure. And right now, we just have some sort of half-baked truth of measuring it, if you measure it at all. So there.
And that could be changing.
It's changing right now. That's why that's what my team really does, right? We go in, we find data sources, we build carbon footprints. And a lot of it is just making sure the data is good. We come from an auditor side. The other part of me is the auditor. I go into someone that gives me a carbon footprint. Similarly, how do I know this to be true, right? And that is what's going to happen with the SEC proposal. 10K data, regulatory reporting, is reasonably assured. There's no reasonable assurance yet in SEC, whatever climate data. That's going to be phased in, because a lot of companies don't even know how to check for things such as completeness, accuracy, right? Because if I can go to you, I was telling Irina yesterday, I can go to anyone and say, what is your spend on, I don't know, spend on marketing last month? They will go to an audited, right? Audited system, SAP, boop, 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 give it to me in 20 seconds. What is your kilowatt hour spend or not spend? What is your kilowatt hour 3 months ago? They'll be like, what are you talking about? I paid it and put it in a shoebox. Show me that invoice, right? Because carbon accounting is very simple. It is activity times emissions. You got to find the activity, but most people don't track it. And a big part of it is like we are asking people to gather data that they have not gathered before. And because the whole world is kind of talking about net zero, a lot of companies are like freaking out about it. That's why there's so much resistance, in my opinion, right? So a lot of it is like when I go to clients, it's okay, we estimate 70% of your data this year. Next year, let's think about process and controls, make sure the data is better. Okay, next year we're at 50%. All right, we didn't consider this, all right, because going back to like the cost thing, I ask everyone here, what are your fuel sources that you use? You're like, what are you talking about? Same with a company. I can say, what is your cost? They go for a number. But if I go say, you know, what are your fuel sources? Yeah, you might have natural gas, you might have electricity, but you're a warehouse, your forklifts, are they propane based? Are they electricity? Do you have a diesel generator in the back? I don't know. And if I just ask a facility manager that, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? And they're going to spin their wheels until they get me the data. And I have to go in and kind of work with every client to make sure data. Mining companies, I've worked with a mining company that use a lot of ATVs to get around, right? How do you capture that? What is your process to do that? Do you have fuel consumption? No, you just have spend data. Okay, we got to backtrack that. Some mining companies, I learned this as of today, use a process called calcination, right? We have to figure out a way to find about fugitive emissions associated with calcination, right? How do you measure that, right? We don't, and then furthermore, how do you audit that? How do you make sure that you, when you get that report, is good? But to your point, that's going to change in 4 years. And that is what my team does, essentially.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to be coming back to that. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Albert.
We're not doing questions yet, is that right?
Not yet.
You can ask as many questions. This is my job. This is all I do is talk to people.
Not yet. We'll get to
Gotcha.
that. Okay, so Irina, why are we here today and what is the business imperative for this?
And that's a good question. And that's what we talk to our clients about, right? The business imperative. We don't want to get political. ESG can quickly become a political discussion, but at Bank of America, we talk about the business imperative. Now, if we can take a step back, what is net zero, right? Net zero will be achieved when the amount of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere is balanced by the amount that's removed. And that's what Albert helps clients kind of measure. And so regardless of the industry that our companies, our clients are in, the supply chain is vulnerable. And 66% of S&P 500 companies have set emission reducing targets. And as large corporate commitments accelerate, there's a potential for our smaller to middle-sized clients to be left out of key customer relationships. So the business imperative now is the benefits of starting the journey for net zero commitment is the opportunity to gain market share for businesses. As you start, the first movers in this space can differentiate themselves and gain more business from their competitors. And at the end of the day, boost the bottom line. And that's what we are helping our clients realize and help them get there and try to differentiate themselves in their industry, regardless of what size or what industry they're in.
Okay. Mel, you did refer to this just a bit at the top when I asked you the first question, but do you want to elaborate a bit more about the S and ESG, the people and the impact of climate change?
Sure, and I'd also like to start by just playing off of Albert's comment, that are ESG regulations burdensome? Yes and no, because obviously any additional reporting implies additional costs. But the reality is that particularly for the mining industry right now, there's such a plethora of standards against which one is being judged. The EU has a very comprehensive document on what it expects for ESG. The United Nations has a very complex document on what it envisions for ESG behavior. Certain industries have established ESG guidelines, including, by the way, the mining industry. The International Council of Mining and Metals has ESG guidelines for its member companies to work against. And all of that just creates confusion. And to the extent that the SEC regulations are American and affect American companies, that's great for companies like Freeport or a company operating and doing business in the United States. How does that, and maybe that's a question for the question session that I'd like to direct to Albert, how's that going to help a internationally based company that's also working in Chile and Peru, when those countries also have their own individual ESG guidelines? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to have agreement at a political level on what kind of guidance we expect industries to operate against. Because right now, definitions of what is net zero and definitions of what is ESG remain highly variable.
The way the utility system is a very one-way data transfer. You only know single points, like theoretically it's peak and off-peak hours. That's what smart metering is. There's an energy company called Grid Rewards that they're trying to use smart meters to get data in real time so you can make better energy decisions, right? It translates into CO2. I'm like, I always want to kind of audit that data now. I'm like, what does that mean? But basically it's the idea of data. It's all a data issue. Utilities give you data one way. You get it down one way, right? Even utilities companies now, I work with a utility company and they're trying to get transmission and loss data. There's some the standard is an estimation of 5% loss of transmission of energy from like the coal nuclear plant, say in Indian Head, all the way down here. Sorry, old Indian Head. They shut down that nuclear plant. But that's not true. Now they have I work with a company, one is called Singularity Energy, and they're trying to find real-time transmission and loss data to help give the utility company better information so they can make better choices too. For you as a consumer, think about it. What if I can incentivize you, if you knew when your energy was, hey, I'll give you a rebate if you run your dishwasher at night.
Yeah.
Right? That's a small thing you can do. I won't have to do it during peak hours when I have to turn on a peaker plant, peaker plants are the ones that are like the Ravenswood. They're all over 14th Street, right? Yeah. Those are the ones that get variable generation. For those that don't know, electricity is a big issue, but electricity is nothing like you've ever seen before, that it needs to perfectly match supply and demand at the same time. Peaker plants have to adjust that supply. So a hot day, turn on your air conditioner, and that's usually coal and natural gas because that responds the fastest. Nuclear takes maybe 5 days to fire up. That's why it's called a base load, and that's why it's cheaper, right? That's how you as a consumer could do it, thinking about it. And if you just thought about it, most people could reduce their emissions. Like people have thought about their plastic usage, right? So we use aluminum.
My question is, I get that. The question for us, I think, is not make me think about it, is how do we make millions of people think about it?
Right.
But it's just going to take time, right? We measure it. We first have to make sure we're all talking the right thing. We can't all be talking about net zero and assuming that it's getting outraged that it's not net zero. 90% of companies or something like that have no plan to get to net zero.
Right.
And most net zero is, buying RECs, right? The way Apple and Google, we can talk about that too. But it's like, we just have to know where we are. It's okay that we're not at net zero, understanding we're here. It's okay that we're here. We'll get there, right? That's that education. It's not like all of a sudden you didn't get a master's right here. It took years, right? That's kind of where we are in that maturity curve. And I think that's my job. That's why I have a job. If you don't know, I'm a natural storyteller, right? And all I do is I talk and I just make these things. I talk about your product, talk about your product. I can draw it all together. That's like my value add, because a lot of this is very simple, in my opinion.
I'm just saying, yeah, I was
That's
gonna
right.
say, Irina.
Yeah, your question is spot on. And as a banker, right, we go out and we meet with our clients and we try to build this advisory relationship, and we want to educate our clients on what should they be thinking about. And we go out and we tell them, hey, look, have you heard about net zero? And most small companies are like, what are you talking about? So at Bank of America, we're taking the responsibility upon ourselves to do that education process and create the awareness so that they can start thinking about, okay, let me try to collect some data of sources and uses, and then how do I minimize and try to get to net zero before my competition, because that's the business imperative, so that as these large corporates are reviewing their scope 1, 2, and 3, and scope 3 is more of the supply chain, right? If you're a service company and you are involved in a supply chain of a large corporate, it's going to trickle down to you. And if you are closer to the net zero journey than your competition, there's an opportunity for you as a business owner to gain market share.
That's true, right? Like, think of the big issue, like why ESG is getting such this political backlash from like managers. It's because we don't trust the data. What does it mean? It's a marketing tool, right? Like it is, but what if you as a consumer can say, I'm going to invest. I know there's actually greenwashing SEC rules now. SFDR in Europe does that too. I can do an Article 9 fund, make sure that it's doing exactly what it's doing. PwC, Big Four, has gone and audited that data. I have trust. That's literally the name of my group, is trust, because we build trust in that number. I know that's good, right? Corporations can make, and it'll trickle down to your point, scope 3. My thing is, if everyone just thought about their emissions, you would reduce 50% of it. I can't stop staring at this aluminum, because it's like, why is this aluminum?
Because it can get recycled more often than plastic.
Right, exactly. So no.
What is the cost?
No. See,
of creating that?
I have an example, because I've audited this. Aluminum.
It's not just the recycling; it's the cost. Too,
Right.
because the whole plastic bag thing
But we
is
can't.
an optics problem, because the cost of creating a plastic bag
It's like zero.
is so much less than the reusable bags that we use. If you
It's-
go online, it's like
Exactly. So if anyone has gone to the Sims recycling plant down in Sunset Park, they actually recycle everything, and you can see the cost of recycled plastic, that repurposed plastic and aluminum they buy. Aluminum is actually the most profitable. Is because, to your point, aluminum has chemical properties that allows you to smelt it, and it retains it as much as is possible. That's why you see people collect cans. Plastic, not so much. So my example is that's recycled aluminum. Now, prime aluminum, let's go to mining. Prime aluminum is so energy intensive. What they do is they kind of get bauxite out, and they get like a rock, and it's not like the rock of aluminum. You have to get the aluminum ions out, right? So what they call is a process called electrolysis. So they just stick electricity in and just suck all the, like aluminum out. That it could be supply chain, category 1 purchase goods and services. That could be 85 to 90% of aluminum, like one of the largest recyclers in the world. That is still 85 to 95% of their, footprint. Why does that matter? Because then they can go target smelters that have a higher proportion of hydropower, higher proportion, like some are in China that use coal. You know what? They make a business decision. I'm going to get to net zero by targeting the ones that are using hydro. So back to like my example of, we'll say like Delaware. This is why I think we're going toward an internal carbon price. Again, this is my view, right? Not necessarily PwC's. So think about, like, as a CFO, I want to open a plant. If I could price carbon in it, do I want to make a business decision to open a plant in West Virginia, which has high emissions if you look at the grid, or upstate New York, which is closer to Niagara Falls, which is half of that emissions? You can start making business decisions if you evaluated it, right? That's how we're going to get there. And will it, maybe it'll take 10, 20 years. This is what we talk about at happy hour. one of my directors works at like business. She's like, we're not going to get business data for sustainable buildings for like 20 years. I'm like, that sucks, but that's how we're going to get there. You know, it's going to be a combination of the Internet of Things, right? It's going to be a combination of better data, big data. But like the big thing most people don't realize is most people think data is this amorphous cloud that just kind of sits above us, right? That we can pull whatever we want. But you have to track data. You have to make sure it talks to each other. You know, you have to find the right data in the database. That's why Snowflake Data Lake is so important, because you know, companies that are growing this, we see this a lot. Companies that are growing by acquisition are acquiring different data systems. How do you make them talk to each other? There's a whole data system, Snowflake Data Warehouse. I have a friend that works at Cribble that kind of cleans up that data. Like there is, like a lot of people think, and this is my thing, this is still a very manual process to do greenhouse gas accounting. Most people think, oh, there's plenty of tech solutions out there. Most people think they can just get a tech solution, plug it in, will pop out a scope window. That's not true. It's still a manual process because no one knows how to get that data yet. But we'll get there, right? Convergence of that, improvements of everything. You know, I'm excited. It's fun because like to me, I'm like thinking of that ship. I'm on the forefront of that ship telling people where to go.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a catalyst question. Albert, you've talked a lot about financial drivers, but can the three of you share with us, aside from the obvious optic branding of ESG designation for a company, what other catalysts are there for companies to be ESG compliant? Are there tax incentives? Are lending standards going to change? Which I'm curious about. I don't think they are right now, but what financial incentives what financial incentives today are in place and that you anticipate in place that would provide additional catalysts for companies to become more ESG compliant going forward? Because optics is one thing and branding is one thing.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, thank gosh, is really focused on, you know, cleanliness, sustainability. But we have a quarter to quarter mentality, kind of Charles' question alluded to that. And companies, to a point, why do we care? Okay, if we have a branding optics problem, sure, then, you know, we can be ESG, whatever that means. So anyway, that's my question.
I can start,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Albert, you'll have more, and Mel to add. Again, a great question, one that our clients ask us, well, what's in it for me, kind of a thing.
Right.
Well, the sustainability of their business is one, right? If they're going to be left out of contracts just because they're not net zero compliant, so that's the obvious one. But just the natural result of going and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions is reducing costs, right? If you think about it, if you change a regular light bulb in your house into a LED light bulb, you reduce your electricity bill. So those types of differences are there. But there are some government-sponsored financing programs and incentives. Insurance premiums can go down if you are ESG friendly. And then down the line, as there are policy changes and regulatory environments, if you're thinking about it now and you're ready, you'll be ahead of the game.
Like I know New York, starting next year, is going to start imposing fines, right, if you're not within a certain criteria to buildings.
Yeah, and it's like regulated. Like One Vanderbilt was one of the most sustainable buildings. Like they have rainwater, they have open floor, but now it's like there's a New York Times article like that's not even the most sustainable. It'll change with regulation. Sorry,
I would like to add a couple of points. The first of which is that one incentive for companies is to be included in some of these ESG mutual investing funds. Because at least in 2020, those ESG mutuals outgrew the market. So there's a lot of investor incentive for mining companies in particular to find their way into those sorts of baskets to help attract better and newer investment in mining projects. And the second incentive, I would say, is more and more the final end users are interested in how compliant mines are with ESG. I mean, I can give you a concrete example. It's not my mining company, but I'm aware of this. Samsung would like to source rare earth materials from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's a Canadian company that's mining rare earth materials in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Samsung is going to be making a field trip to that mine to satisfy their own auditors that the mine is fully compliant with ESG and human rights rubrics. So there's a positive incentive in the sense of getting more investors. There's also a potentially negative incentive of having your end user say, well, you know what, we can't buy from you because you haven't met the standards.
I want to
Thank
piggyback
you.
off of that, right? It's a supplier thing. We'll have people that will fight tooth and nail not wanting to do this, but their biggest supplier is saying, I want your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions because that's my scope 3. And my investors are asking for that. Maybe I want to be part of a sustainable XYZ coalition. I need to report it a certain way. That's why there's a throughput of all this data, right? Speaking of like younger folks, I work with some of the most passionate and bright. I'm so excited to work with my team every day. And they make decisions, even on a job, about if a company has reported or not their sustainability goals or whatever, right? Like that's the throughput that you can see, and all of it, I think it's all just come from better data and understanding the data. We can make better decisions, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
But as long as we're more aware of what's happening, if you thought, like my big thing is if you thought about it, you could reduce a lot, in my opinion.
Okay, I just wanted to give a chance to some of the people who are joining virtually. If anyone has a question for the 3 speakers, you can just raise your hand, and Irina, I will ask you to unmic. So think about it. We have time for at least 2 more questions. So is there anyone on the online version that would like to ask a question of the 3?
While you're waiting for that, Susan, I would like to jump in on, and I don't know if the gentleman is still in the room. The question is essentially focused on, informing the public about why these things matter. And he was like, no offense, but I really can't care why should I worry about, roads being blocked in Peru? Answer, if the copper doesn't get out of Peru to the company that needs it to, let's just say, manufacture iPhones, either the price of your iPhone goes up or you can't buy one at all, as we recently saw with the semiconductor shortage, some of which was precisely due to the semiconductor companies not being able to source enough copper to build semiconductors. That's why you should care.
Yeah, that's a good answer. We have to get that to Charles Bernard. He was the one who asked the question. We'll make sure to tell him. Okay, so I haven't seen any hands raised here. Anyone else here in the room have a question for one of our speakers?
I have a question on consumer, probably for Albert, I would guess.
Go
Because
ahead.
we talked about business, and yes, I own 2 businesses, but as a consumer in New York City, I wonder what we can do as just as an average everyday consumer to make a change. Is there, any like local New York City government type of initiatives that we could find out about, just about, owning a home in New York City, some of the things that you can do, some resources that you guys could talk about?
I mean, the resources are all out there. You just have to learn how to find it and interpret the data, unfortunately. Like things like you can make decisions as a consumer to make it better. Buy locally sourced fruits and vegetables that are in season. Go to farmers markets. Why?
Right.
Because how does that banana get in here? It's a lot of diesel, that's merchant shipping, right? What if it's not in season? It has to come from, say, like Brazil, right? Stop flying. You don't want the number, like honestly,
What?
stop flying. Jet fuel is there's a book that you should everyone, the carbon footprint of everything. The idea is to live a 5 megaton life. I still fly, right? So like honestly, if you want to do it, stop flying. Like there's things that you can do. You have to start thinking about how you measure, like what your impact. It's part of building your carbon footprint and budget.
Yeah.
Right? My weird mental gymnastics, I help enough take carbon out that whatever, I'll take a flight here and there. But honestly, that's like the most prohibitive, that's one of the biggest contributors, right, that you don't think about. Like everything, you just kind of like think about it, make decisions consciously, and you will be able to make a difference, right? Like if you just don't know what the data is yet, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know how much you spend on it, but at the end of the day, if you just thought about it, you could reduce your emissions. Like even like the plastic thing, people are waving. I kind of laugh at a plastic straw because people use it, but now what has happened? Starbucks has created plastic lids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? How about we stop using plastic cups? How about stop going to Starbucks? How about bring a plastic cup to Starbucks?
Well, let's understand is, and I'm all about, no plastic bags, but then you learn the example that I used, that the energy it takes to create that reusable bag equates to something like
You have to use-
20,000 plastic bags.
you have to,
It's
they
the
did a
crossover point. Or
they did a
something
life
like that.
cycle analysis, about 20,
Yeah.
and that's the thing,
And the
right?
straw is the same thing.
So here's the reason why, what we evaluate on, right? Like I went to business school, I got my master's, and I was still under the idea of Milton Friedman as a
Mhm.
manager of a company, you do what's best for the shareholder. Now we're going to stakeholder because there's a whole life cycle you don't
Yeah.
think about. This is the idea of cost and consumption. You just think of dollars and cents, what I need to do. You feel that it is this. But with consumption data, you can start thinking of supply chain. Where does this bag come from? Does it come from copper in Peru, right? Where does this kind of material come from? If you thought about it and you understand it, it's a different way to evaluate. When you go to the store, you just think what I'm spending in my wallet now. If you just thought about, if you knew the cost of carbon in your mind, what the price of, even a text is like 0.8 something, but it's negligible, right? But that is the idea of using consumption data to better evaluate externalities in the world. We are not there yet. We will get there.
You know what's
Okay, just before, I wanted to make sure we
Yep.
have enough time. You guys will have a chance to talk
No, it's
after.
fine.
All right, Mel, do you have anything you would like to close with? Because we're very close to the end of the hour here.
Just close by saying that the example that Albert was citing from that book, well, just don't fly. Or let's say you live in Phoenix, turn off your air conditioning. It's only 120 degrees outside. And that actually is a very serious problem because it fuels the, oh, it's impossible anyway, so why even try argument. So I guess my closing word would be that if everyone from the corporate level to the individual level does our best, yeah, maybe net zero is not achievable, but how about, 0.1? Let's get as close as we can to save the planet, right? So that's my final word.
Okay, thank you. So Irina, I'm going to give you the closing comment here.
Sure. I would say, and this was said, let's start with awareness, right? If we start thinking about it and we're aware of even as we go about our day as a consumer, as banking is involved, do you want to write that check or can you send that payment electronically and save paper, save the fuel that transports that check? It's really trying to see what we can do individually, and then and every little bit helps.
Excellent. All right, these were excellent comments and questions from everybody here. I just wanted to close with saying that the next time the Global Chamber New York City chapter will schedule to get together is May 10th. We're co-partnering with the World Trade Week New York City event, which will be at Baruch College. So we'll be getting out more information about that. And then in June, there will be a program that actually Toby, who you heard ask questions, and Ling Chang, who's here, will be doing a program on the life cycle of getting capital for your business. And we will be adding more as we go along. I want to thank everybody for coming today. We have to stay close to the hour. We can have a little bit of time to chat after. But I wanted to thank Irina for hosting us, Albert for coming over and sharing with us all this information about data and regulatory, and Mel from joining us from Arizona. And thank you very much for everybody. And we'll be we have recorded this, and we'll be getting it out to people if they have any desires to share it with your sphere of influence. Thank you very much. And we're going to close out right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Two.